My name is Elisa Green. I'm 57 years old. And what I'm about to tell you today will forever change the way you see your own family.
What if the person who once kissed your forehead is the same one who makes you flinch at every footstep? Elisa Green was the perfect wife, until silence became a bruise and breakfast became a war zone. This isn't just a story of pain, it's a story of truth, of reckoning, and of the quiet sound of peace.
Before we begin this story, let me know where you are listening from in the comments below.
The bruise on my left cheek was fading into a dull yellow, like the sun setting behind thick clouds. It didn't hurt as much anymore. Not physically, anyway. The real pain lived deeper, somewhere just beneath the skin, in a place no one could see, a place I had stopped trying to explain. I laid out the breakfast table like I always did. 2 plates, 2 mugs, forks on the left, knives on the right. The butter dish was centered just so, the jam spoon wiped clean at the edge. I even used the linen napkins today, the cream ones with the lace edges that Walter's mother had given us as a wedding gift. It all looked perfect. Magazine perfect. Across from me sat an empty chair, and in that emptiness I saw everything. Every cold shoulder, every dismissive shrug, every silent dinner where my voice got swallowed by his indifference. I sat down slowly, tucking my robe tighter around me, my fingers brushing the edge of the silver spoon, the one engraved with a W and an E. His mother's initials came before mine. Fitting. This breakfast wasn't for him. It was for me. For 18 years I had convinced myself that keeping up the routine meant stability, that his bad days were just bad days, that I could be patient enough, kind enough, strong enough to pull him back from whatever dark place he was stuck in. But men like Walter don't come back. They just pull you in with them. His footsteps echoed down the stairs, slow and heavy. A thud on the 3rd step, always the squeaky one. He cleared his throat as he entered the kitchen, rubbing sleep from his eyes like a man who didn't wake up next to silence. "Morning," he muttered. He didn't look at me, just walked straight to the coffee pot and poured himself a cup like it was any other Tuesday. "It's hot," I said softly. "Hmm?" "The coffee. I just brewed it." He grunted in response and sat down at his place, scrolling through his phone like he hadn't backhanded me 2 nights ago because I asked him why he came home so late. His wedding ring glinted in the light as he held the mug. Funny how that little circle of gold meant nothing anymore. Not loyalty, not love, just history. He reached for the toast, buttered it the way he liked, then sprinkled it with cinnamon sugar, the same way I used to do it for him. He ate in silence, chewing slowly, sipping. The quiet between us had become normal, an ache I no longer questioned. "You're not eating?" he asked without looking up. "No." "You should eat." "I'm fine." It was always like that. He'd throw me a line and expect me to catch it, reel myself back into his orbit. Not today. I watched him eat instead. Every bite, every sip, like I was observing a stranger. Once, I would have sat here nervous, wondering if I'd made the eggs too runny or the toast too dark. But this morning, I didn't care. Not about his mood, not about his silence, not even about the bruise. I was done waiting for him to notice. "Do you remember the first breakfast I made you?" I asked suddenly. He blinked, surprised. "What?" "Our first apartment, tiny little kitchen. I made pancakes, and you said they were rubbery." He chuckled faintly. "Yeah, I think you burned them." "I was so nervous," I said. "I wanted everything to be perfect." He looked up for the first time. His eyes scanned my face, pausing on the faded bruise. I saw it. The flicker of guilt. Or maybe just recognition. "That was a long time ago," he said, sipping his coffee. Yes, a lifetime ago. You used to hum in the mornings, I added, even before coffee. Remember that? I guess. I leaned back in my chair, studying him like I was seeing him for the first time. The man who once danced with me barefoot in the kitchen now sat hunched over his phone, face tired, soul older than his years. The sparkle was gone, not just in his eyes, in everything. I miss that version of you, I said. My voice didn't shake. He scoffed. Well, life changes people. I nodded. It does. I stood up, carried my untouched plate to the sink, and rinsed it clean. Water running over porcelain, steam rising. I thought about how many times I'd done this. Cleaned up after him, wiped away the mess, smoothed over the cracks. But some cracks split the whole foundation. Behind me, I heard him sigh. What's this about, Elisa? I turned slowly. He looked tired, like a man who didn't know he'd already lost. Nothing, I said. Just talking. You're acting weird. Am I? He frowned. You mad about something? That almost made me laugh. Mad? No. I had been mad years ago. Now I was just done. You hit me, Walter. He flinched. I was drunk. You were pushing. I asked you about an apartment listing. That's not pushing. That's surviving. He looked away. I dried my hands on the dish towel and moved toward the stairs. At the foot of them, I paused. Oh, and Walter? He didn't answer, but I knew he was listening. Thank you for breakfast? His confusion was thick in the air. I didn't clarify. Some goodbyes don't need explanation. Upstairs, in our bedroom, I opened the drawer where I kept the small leather notebook. Gloria had given it to me months ago. Not for court, she'd said. For you. For truth. I opened to a blank page and wrote, Today, I made breakfast for the man who broke me, and I didn't do it to keep the peace. I did it to reclaim it. And for the first time in years, I smiled. There are moments in life when you realize you've been loving a memory, not a person. A shadow, not a man. A version of someone who only exists in photographs and stories you tell to keep your heart from breaking. That was Walter for me. A ghost wearing the skin of the man I once loved. He didn't vanish overnight. If he had, maybe I would have had the clarity to leave sooner. But grief plays tricks on you. It makes you cling to scraps. Fragments of warmth, fleeting smiles, old jokes resurrected for a moment before disappearing again. And Walter's disappearance was slow enough that I didn't notice the pieces falling away until nothing recognizable was left. I still see him sometimes in my mind. The old Walter. Back when his smile came easily and his eyes held something bright. At our wedding, during our first dance, he whispered, You make me brave, Elle. And I believed him. I believed we were building something solid, something that could weather storms. But then came the storm no one prepared us for. The accusation, the one that shattered the surface of our life like a stone thrown into glass. Financial inconsistency, they called it. A discrepancy. A single line in a report. A number that someone decided didn't look right. And suddenly, Walter was no longer Walter. He was a liability, a question mark, a man everyone avoided making eye contact with. I remember the night he came home after the meeting that sealed his fate. He walked in like his bones were too heavy to hold him up. He sat at the kitchen table, clasped his hands, and stared straight ahead. They think I'm a thief, he whispered. I touched his shoulder gently. I know you didn't do anything wrong. He swallowed hard. It doesn't matter. That was the moment the light went out. After that night, He didn't laugh the same, didn't touch me the same, didn't breathe the same. His movements became rigid, like everything required more effort than he had. His voice flattened. His joy disappeared. At first, I thought it was depression, trauma, shame. I told myself healing takes time, but healing only works if someone wants to rise again. Walter didn't want to rise. He wanted to sink, and he wanted company. The first signs were small. The change in tone when he spoke to me, sharp where it used to be playful. The dismissive wave of his hand when I'd ask how he was feeling. The way he'd walk past me in the hallway like I was a piece of furniture. Then came the corrections. "You always tell stories wrong, Elisa." "No, that's not how it happened. You exaggerate everything. You're too sensitive. God, can't you take a joke?" It didn't matter what I said. I was wrong before the words left my mouth. I remember one night vividly. I made dinner, roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, his favorite herbed carrots. I used to love watching him eat after a long day. But that night, he took a bite, grimaced, and pushed his plate away. "Too salty." "I didn't add any salt yet, Walter." "Well, it tastes salty." I stood there holding the serving spoon, my heart pounding so loudly I could hear it in my ears. I told myself he was hurting, and hurting people lash out. But even that justification started feeling thin. He drank more. A beer with lunch became 2, bourbon at night. Cheap whiskey hidden in the cabinet behind the pasta boxes. I found an empty bottle rolled under the couch once, like even the trash didn't want to hold it. He'd come home smelling of old wood and alcohol, sometimes so drunk he'd miss the last stair and stumble into the hallway wall. And when I tried to help him, he'd shove my hand away. "I don't need you," he'd mutter. "I never needed you." But the next morning, he'd ask where his coffee was, as if the venom from the night before had evaporated with the sunrise. The worst part wasn't the anger, it was the emptiness. He would sit in the recliner for hours, staring at the muted TV, completely still, except for the rise and fall of his chest. Sometimes I'd walk into the room and catch him looking at nothing, his eyes glassy, his jaw tight. He wasn't present. He was trapped in some invisible cage inside himself, and all the love I offered couldn't reach him. I felt like a widow, but my husband was still breathing. And yet, I stayed. I stayed because I believed in vows, in history, in the promise we made to each other. I stayed because every once in a while, I'd glimpse the man he used to be. A soft sigh, a shared memory, a moment where his eyes softened. Those tiny glimpses were just enough to keep hope alive, even as everything else inside me grew numb. Then came the day everything crystallized. It was a Tuesday at work. I reached for a folder on the top shelf, and my sleeve slipped down. The faint yellow of a bruise, shaped like fingers, appeared on my forearm. I froze. And so did Gloria. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Elisa, who did that?" I banged it on the dryer door." I lied too quickly. Her eyes didn't waver. She wasn't fooled. Not by me. Not by the story I'd told myself too many times. She didn't say, "Leave him." She didn't say, "Call the police." She said something far more dangerous. "Elisa, you deserve to hear yourself. Not the version of your life he tells you. The one you know is real. Write it down." Write what down? Everything. Even the small things. Especially the small things. You're not keeping evidence for the court. You're keeping evidence for your heart. That night, while Walter snored beside me, mouth open, breath sour with whiskey, I slipped out of bed and sat on the hallway floor with my knees hugged to my chest. The house was cold, silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant tick of the hallway clock. I opened the leather notebook Gloria gave me. The paper smelled like possibility. My hand shook as I held the pen, not from fear, from recognition. I wrote the first sentence slowly, letting the truth bleed onto the page. He hasn't hit me today, but I still flinched when he reached for the remote. Then another. He calls me forgetful, but he's the one who forgets our conversations. Then, I used to feel safe with him. Now I feel small. And finally, I still miss the man he used to be. That might be the most painful part. I closed the notebook gently and held it to my chest. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel alone. I felt awake. By the time the bruises showed up on my body, I had already learned to hide the ones inside. The first scar wasn't purple or blue. It came one afternoon, in the frozen food aisle at Harper's Grocery, when I asked Walter whether he wanted chicken or beef pot pies. I wasn't trying to start a fight. I was just trying to be kind. But he looked at me like I was a mosquito buzzing in his ear and said flatly, "Why do you always ask the dumbest questions in public?" The cashier nearby froze. I smiled, like it was a joke between lovers, but something inside me chipped. That's how it always started. 1,000 little cuts. The way he'd mock the shows I liked. The way he'd scoff when I talked about my work. "You act like what you do matters," he said once, when I mentioned a client thank you email. Another time, when I wore a new dress to Sunday service, he leaned in and whispered, "You look like you're trying too hard." At first, I told myself he was hurting. That shame had warped his mouth into something sharp. That the man I married was still in there, just buried beneath the rubble of a lost job, a bruised ego, and pride too swollen to speak honestly. But with each passing month, his words became routine, rehearsed. He wasn't lashing out. He was controlling the room, controlling me. He took over the bank account to simplify things. Within weeks, I didn't know our PIN numbers anymore. He'd sigh loudly if I spent more than $20 without asking. He made it seem like responsibility, but it was really a leash, and he made sure I knew how short it was. Then came the day he berated me for the electricity bill. "You leave lights on all over the damn house," he barked, slapping the envelope on the kitchen table. "You think money grows on trees?" I didn't tell him I'd already paid it. I just nodded, took the blame, and lowered the dimmers, like that might keep the peace. I learned that silence was safer than explaining myself, until silence became a prison. The physical signs started showing after that. Small things at first. A hand grabbed too tight, an elbow yanked a little too fast. He always apologized afterward. Sort of. Usually it came in the form of excuses. "You startled me. Don't sneak up behind me like that. Why are you so sensitive all the time?" One evening, I accidentally dropped a glass measuring cup. It shattered across the tile, startling us both. I bent down to sweep it, and he stood over me, fists clenched, eyes dark. "I swear to God, Elisa," he hissed, "you are useless sometimes." That night, I lay in bed with my back to him and wept into the pillow, silently, like I had learned to do. But I still stayed, because I believed in the man I used to know, and because people like Walter are good at making you believe that you are the one who's broken. Then came the moment I stopped believing the lie. We were shopping for a new blouse for the church fundraiser. I had found a navy button-down on the clearance rack, $29, final sale. I held it up to my chest and turned to Walter. "It's nice, right? Modest, but still a little dressy." He took one look and snatched it from my hands. "Put it back. It's on sale." I said, "Put it back." He grabbed my wrist before I could respond. tight enough that my fingers went cold. My heart pounded as I glanced around. A woman by the shoe aisle made brief eye contact before quickly looking away. He dropped my wrist and walked off like nothing had happened. At home, I stood in front of the mirror and stared at the red imprint. I didn't cry. I just covered it with foundation and moved on. The next day at work, Gloria saw the bruise as I reached across the counter for a highlighter. Her eyes followed the sleeve that had slipped. "Elisa," she said gently, "what happened?" "Laundry basket." I lied. She didn't press. But before she left for the day, she slid a leather notebook across my desk. "You don't have to talk to anyone, but you do need to tell someone, even if that someone is just you." That night, when Walter was asleep, I opened the notebook under the low light of my bedside lamp. The pages were cream-colored, untouched, waiting. I wrote slowly, letting the truth spill out, word by word. He grabbed my wrist because I wanted a blouse. The bruise bloomed like a flower. I didn't cry. I just thanked him for paying the cable bill. After that, I started documenting everything. Monday. He yelled at me for forgetting to replace the coffee filters, said I was too lazy to keep up with basic things. I apologized. He didn't hear me. Thursday. He joked about my thighs in front of his brother. I laughed with them, then cried in the bathroom. Saturday. He slammed the fridge door so hard it bounced back open. I waited 5 minutes before going in for the milk. Each entry was a seed, quiet, but alive, proof that I was not crazy, that this was real. I began taking photos too. The shattered coffee mug, the bruised arm, the dent in the drywall near the coat rack. I wasn't gathering them for the police. I was gathering them for myself, so that when the gaslighting got too thick, I had something solid to hold. One night, Walter came home drunk. I had left his dinner in the microwave. He opened it, took one bite, and spit it into the trash. "You trying to poison me?" He slurred. He threw the plate against the wall. I didn't flinch. I wrote it down. And beneath that entry I added, "One day, this will be the proof I use to walk out of this house and never return." That was the night I knew the notebook wasn't just testimony. It was survival. I used to believe that faith was something you held on to no matter what, that if you clutched hard enough, held fast through the storm, eventually the light would return. But even the strongest grip loosens when you've been holding on to nothing for too long. The first Sunday I missed church, I told myself it was just exhaustion. I'd had a long week, and Walter hadn't slept, which meant neither had I. But the truth was, I couldn't bear the thought of putting on a dress, brushing on a fake smile, and sitting among people who still thought of us as Walter and Elisa, the faithful, devoted couple with a picture-perfect marriage. I couldn't bring myself to face Reverend Brooks, who always looked me in the eye with such warmth and sincerity. I was terrified he might see through me, that he might ask a question I couldn't lie my way out of. So I stayed home. Then I stayed home again. And again. Ruthie called after the second week. Her voice was light, but I could hear the concern beneath it. "Hey, hun, just wanted to check on you. We missed you today. Everything okay?" I told her I had a cold, that I didn't want to spread it around. She offered to bring soup. I said no. By the fourth Sunday, I didn't even try to explain. I let her call go to voicemail. She left a message anyway. "Elisa, I know something's not right. I'm not judging. I just want you to know you're not alone. You're never alone, okay?" But I was alone. Even with Walter snoring on the couch 10 feet away, I had never felt more abandoned. I stopped reading my Bible. It sat on the nightstand like a reminder of a life that felt too far away. When I tried to pray, the words caught in my throat. I didn't feel heard. I didn't feel seen. I felt invisible. Walter had settled into a routine of chaos. He'd wake late, shuffle through the kitchen in silence, pour half a bottle of whiskey into his coffee. Most days, he didn't even glance in my direction. On the rare occasions he spoke, it was only to criticize. You let the plants die. This house smells like cheap perfume. You spend too much on groceries. What do you even do all day? I cooked, I cleaned, I worked part-time at the floral shop. I folded his laundry and paid the bills he couldn't be bothered to open. But nothing I did mattered. Not to him, not anymore. The silence between us was no longer tension. It was surrender. He didn't even bother pretending to care. The house changed, too. It used to feel warm, full of laughter and music. I once painted the kitchen cabinets a cheerful sunflower yellow just because Walter said it reminded him of summer. Now, that yellow felt like a mockery, a colour too bright for a space that had gone cold. The air always smelled faintly of bourbon and resentment. Even with the windows open, I couldn't seem to get the staleness out. I scrubbed the counters until my hands were raw. I lit candles, burned sage. Nothing helped. The chill ran deeper than the draft under the door. It lived in the floorboards, the sheets, the space between our bodies in bed. One night, Walter came home later than usual, reeking of cheap alcohol. He stumbled into the living room, bumped into the coffee table, and cursed under his breath. I didn't move. I sat frozen in the kitchen, staring at the cup of tea I'd made hours ago. He never said a word to me, just collapsed onto the couch, shoes still on. I watched him for a long time, listening to his uneven breathing. His chest rose and fell like he hadn't a care in the world. And I realized something terrible. I didn't feel sad. I felt numb. I began sleeping less. Even when I was exhausted, my body wouldn't rest. I lay awake in bed, eyes on the ceiling, breath held, waiting for something. A sound, a word, a crack. Some nights, Walter would shift in his sleep and mutter incoherently. I'd press myself against the farthest edge of the bed, holding the blanket like armor. Eventually, I started sleeping on the couch. He never noticed, or if he did, he never asked why. That was when I started marking the calendar. It was just a tiny one, a freebie from the pharmacy, but I hung it behind the pantry door, hidden from sight. I didn't know what I was tracking at first. I just knew I needed to mark time, to prove to myself that I still existed in it. A red X for every day I got through without breaking. 1 day, 2 days, 10. I didn't miss a single one, until the night I did. It was after an argument, one of his worst. He accused me of throwing away his mail. I hadn't. He'd just misplaced it, like always. But he didn't want truth. He wanted someone to blame. His words came fast, sharp. You're pathetic. No wonder I'm stuck here. You were never enough, not even back then. That night, I sat on the pantry floor, arms wrapped around my knees, and I forgot to mark the calendar. The next morning, when I realized, I cried. Not because I broke the streak, but because I felt like I'd lost whatever thread of control I had left. I stopped answering Gloria's messages. She'd been gentle, consistent, always ending with, "You don't have to say anything. I just want you to know I see you." But the truth was, I didn't want to be seen. Because if someone saw me, really saw me, they'd ask the question I couldn't answer. Why are you still there? So instead, I poured myself into the one place that still felt like mine. My notebook. Every night, after Walter passed out, I wrote, "He didn't yell tonight, but he didn't speak either. I'm not sure which is worse. He left the front door open. I closed it. He said nothing. I lit a candle. He blew it out. The pages were beginning to fill, not with rage, with evidence, not for court, not for the police, for me. To remind myself that what I was experiencing was real, that it wasn't in my head, that I hadn't imagined the bruises, the silence, the slow erosion of my joy. One cold October night, I stood outside, barefoot on the porch, wrapped in a sweater. The wind carried the scent of wood smoke from a neighbor's chimney. For a moment, I let myself imagine a different life, one where Walter came outside, placed a blanket around my shoulders and said, "Let's start over." But that life didn't exist anymore. Maybe it never had. I looked up at the stars, silent, distant, uncaring, and whispered, "God, if you're still there, please don't let me forget who I was before this." There was no reply, but somehow, just saying the words out loud made me feel a little less alone. It had rained earlier that day, the kind of grey drizzle that coated the windows in a thin fog and made everything feel heavier than it already was. Walter had been in a foul mood since morning, slamming cabinets, muttering under his breath. I had stayed out of his way, like I always did, floating around the edges of the house like a ghost, trying not to be seen. He hadn't shaved in days. His hair was uncombed, his eyes bloodshot. He looked like a man unraveling. But I was the one who had started to feel threadbare. That afternoon, after folding the last load of laundry, I pulled out the envelope I'd hidden beneath my sweaters. Inside was a black and white printout of an apartment listing I had found weeks earlier. A small place just outside the city. Nothing fancy. White walls, laminate floors, a kitchenette with just enough room for a tiny two-seater table. But it had a window, a real window that opened, and a lock that only I would have the key to. I had tucked it away in my favourite book, The Secret Garden, a habit from childhood when I used to hide little dreams inside stories I loved. I didn't think Walter would ever open it. He hadn't touched a book in years, but that night, he did. I was in the kitchen, wiping down the counter, when I heard the drawer slam. Then the thud of footsteps, then his voice, low, tight, venomous. "Elisa!" I turned slowly. He was holding the printout, crumpled in one hand. His other hand shook. "What the hell is this?" "It's just a listing," I said quietly. "For what?" I hesitated. I just wanted to see what was out there. His eyes narrowed. "You looking to leave?" I don't know." "You don't know?" His voice rose. "So you're planning something behind my back and you don't know?" "I'm not planning anything," I lied. "It's just paper. Just a maybe." He stepped closer. "You ungrateful little—" And then it came. Not the first time, but the last. His hand struck the side of my face hard enough to send me stumbling back against the edge of the counter. My shoulder cracked against the corner drawer. For a moment, everything buzzed, ears ringing, vision pulsing. Then stillness, and something inside me, quietly, irreversibly, snapped. I didn't scream, didn't cry. I stood up, steadying myself with one hand against the sink. My cheek throbbed, but I barely felt it. All my senses were focused on one thing, my reflection. The oven door's glass reflected just enough to catch my face. Split lip, messy hair, eyes wide, but not afraid, clear. And in that reflection, I saw a woman who had stopped begging for love, a woman who had stopped asking to be seen. I saw myself, and I knew right then I would not go back to sleep in the same bed as this man. Not again. He kept yelling behind me, words that blurred into background noise. You've been looking for a way out this whole time, haven't you? I do everything for you, and you sneak around like a coward. I should have left you years ago. I didn't answer. I walked past him, calm, like he wasn't even there. In the bathroom, I flipped on the light and faced the mirror. The cut on my lip was already darkening. My shoulder ached. But the woman staring back at me was still standing. My chest rose and fell, slow and sure. For the first time in 18 years, I didn't feel like I was waiting for someone to save me. That night, I slept on the living room couch, wrapped in a throw blanket that didn't reach my feet. Walter didn't come out to check on me. He never did. The house creaked with silence and shame, but something had shifted. It wasn't rage, it was resolve. The next morning, I moved like nothing happened. I made coffee, cooked eggs, set the table. Walter stumbled into the kitchen with sleep in his eyes and bitterness in his mouth. He looked at me longer than usual, like he could feel the ground beneath him changing. He didn't say sorry. Of course not. But I didn't wait for it this time. After breakfast, I drove to a small electronics store on the other side of town, paid cash for a tiny surveillance camera and a used iPad. It took the clerk 15 minutes to explain how to sync the feed. I nodded along, but I already knew. I was done waiting. That afternoon, while Walter snored in the bedroom with the door half open, I installed the camera above the pantry door. Small, silent, watching. Not for revenge, for truth. And when it clicked on and the red light blinked once, I felt something electric pass through me. Power. Not over him, but over my own narrative. I began preparing the next morning's breakfast with more intention than usual. I pulled out the wedding china we hadn't used in years, cleaned it until it sparkled, pressed linen napkins, polished silverware. And then I opened the secret garden, removed the wrinkled apartment listing, and folded it into a neat square. I placed it on the counter, where he'd see it, and I waited. He noticed it the moment he walked into the kitchen, picked it up, scanned it, looked at me. "What is this again?" I shrugged, just thinking ahead. He didn't like that. His voice dropped. "You're playing a dangerous game." I met his eyes. "No, I'm done playing." He stared at me for a long time, then walked away, didn't throw it out, didn't crumple it, just left it there on the counter. The camera caught it all. That night, I wrote, "He hit me, and I didn't fall apart." He tried to make me feel small, but I didn't shrink. Today, I began recording the truth, not for court, not for others, for me, so that when I finally walk away, I will not look back and wonder if I imagined it. I closed the notebook gently and exhaled, not from fear, but from freedom. There's something different about the house after midnight. Quieter, yes, but not peaceful. The kind of quiet that echoes, that swells in your chest and makes you feel every breath, every ache, every unspoken word you swallowed just to keep the walls from shaking. Walter was passed out again, his body twisted uncomfortably on the recliner, one shoe off, one still hanging from his foot. The empty bottle on the floor caught the light like a warning sign. The TV was on, but muted, flashing commercials for things we'd never buy. I stood in the doorway, watching him, not with pity, not with fear, but with distance, like I was already somewhere else, watching from a safer place. My lip still throbbed from 2 nights before, when the slap had cracked not just my skin, but something deeper. The bruise on my shoulder bloomed darker each day, hidden beneath long sleeves. But what hurt most wasn't the sting. It was that I had stopped being surprised, until I wasn't. Because something had shifted. And now, standing in that dim living room, I held my phone in one hand, like it was a bridge to a world I had forgotten how to reach. I opened my contacts, and I scrolled to Ruthie. My thumb hovered. We hadn't spoken in weeks. Her texts had become less frequent, her voicemails shorter. I didn't blame her. I had pulled away, disappeared behind the same lies I told myself every day. I'm fine. It's just a phase. He doesn't mean it. I can handle it. But I couldn't. Not anymore. And so, with trembling fingers, I hit call. She answered on the third ring. Groggy, confused. Elisa. My breath caught. I almost hung up. Hey, I managed, voice cracking on that single syllable. Elisa, what's wrong? It's late. I didn't know where to begin. The words gathered in my throat like a storm. I needed to hear your voice. That was all it took. Her tone changed instantly, alert, warm, sisterly. I'm here. Whatever it is, I'm here. I sat down on the kitchen floor, knees tucked to my chest, holding the phone so tight my fingers ached. I didn't tell her everything. Not yet. Just fragments. I haven't been okay. Not for a long time. I didn't want to worry you. She exhaled into the phone. You could never be a burden to me. Elisa, I've known something was wrong. I just didn't know how to reach you. I wiped my face with my sleeve. I'm scared. I know. Another pause. Then, you don't have to do this alone. You never did. Whatever you need, tonight, tomorrow, 6 months from now, I'm yours. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in so long. Safe. After the call ended, I sat in the silence, hands still wrapped around the phone. The house hadn't changed. The air was still stale, the light still too dim, the man in the recliner still snoring like nothing mattered. But something had changed in me. One call wasn't enough. I opened my contacts again. This time I scrolled to Reverend Brooks. He answered on the first ring. Elisa, he said gently, like he'd been waiting. I didn't even say hello. I don't know what I'm doing, I whispered. You don't have to. His voice was like warm bread and old wood and everything steady. I've missed church. I stopped praying. I've stopped believing, I think. That's okay, he said. God hasn't stopped believing in you? I choked back a sob. I feel ashamed. Shame is the devil's favorite tool, not God's. I smiled through the tears. I didn't expect you to answer. I didn't expect you to call, but I'm glad you did. I told him less than I told Ruthie, but more than I had told anyone in years. I need help, I said finally, not just prayer. Help. His response was instant. Then we'll help you, together. I'll call in the morning, and we'll take the next steps. You're not alone, Elisa. Not anymore. I stared at the phone after we hung up. 2 calls. 2 bridges built across years of silence. But I wasn't done, because truth wasn't enough if it wasn't protected. And I was done hiding. I dialed the last number, Detective Monroe. We'd met years ago at a police fundraiser Walter helped organize. He had firm handshakes, steady eyes, not someone easily impressed, but someone who noticed things. His voicemail picked up. I froze. And then, with a breath so deep it hurt, I spoke. Detective Monroe, my name is Elisa Green. We met once, a long time ago. I think I might need help. I have proof. Not just bruises, not just stories. I've been recording, quietly. I'm not ready for anything official yet, but I needed to say it out loud, because silence is killing me. I ended the call with my heart pounding, but also lighter. At 2:03 a.m., I walked to the kitchen and opened the refrigerator. I wasn't hungry, but I pulled out eggs, milk, cinnamon, white bread. I cracked the eggs into a bowl and began to whisk, the sound soft and rhythmic. French toast. A strange thing to make in the middle of the night. But it wasn't for him. It wasn't even for breakfast. It was for me. A ritual. A reclaiming. The last breakfast I would ever make in that house without a plan. I wrote in my notebook. Tonight, I made 3 calls. I reached for faith, for family, for protection. I didn't ask for rescue. I asked to be seen. And in that asking, I remembered my own voice. I didn't cry after that. I ate 1 piece of French toast with too much syrup, and I watched the red light on the camera blink softly in the corner. I was no longer afraid of being watched. I was watching back. I woke just before dawn. The sky outside still bruised with night, not yet pink with promise. The house was heavy with that early silence, the kind that only comes when the world hasn't decided yet if it wants to wake or keep sleeping. Walter was still in bed, still snoring, still unaware. But I was wide awake, and I had a plan. I opened my closet and reached for a garment bag I hadn't touched in years. Inside was the navy blue dress I wore to Mama's funeral. It was plain, long-sleeved, high-necked, respectable, quiet. But there was something dignified about it, like it could hold grief without buckling under the weight. I hadn't worn it since that day, but I slipped it on, zipped it slowly. This wasn't for mourning Mama this time. This was for burying a part of myself. The woman who stayed, the woman who shrank, the woman who bent over backwards just to keep a man from breaking. Today, I was laying her to rest. I walked to my jewelry box and opened the little velvet tray tucked in the back. Nestled in a corner was a tiny silver pin in the shape of a white camellia, delicate and barely worn. Walter gave it to me on our first Christmas together, back when he still remembered what tenderness was, back when he still looked at me like I mattered. I pinned it to my dress just above my heart. Not for sentiment, but for symmetry. That flower, camellia, meant love, yes, but it also meant truth, and truth was all I had left. In the kitchen, I moved with purpose. I took out the wedding china, creamy white with gold trim. We hadn't used it since our 15th anniversary. Walter said it was too fancy for just us. But this morning wasn't about just us. This morning was a declaration. I set the table for 2, carefully placing each plate on the linen placemats. Napkins folded, silverware polished. I even took out the antique cream pitcher Mama left me and filled it with fresh milk. Then, the final piece. The wedding teacups. Bone china so thin the light passed through them. As I placed them down, I whispered, "This is your funeral?" Not Walter's. Mine. The death of silence. The burial of fear. I made the coffee using the expensive machine Walter once said was a waste of money when I bought it with my first freelance check. He never drank from it. Out of spite, I think. Today, I brewed it strong. The scent filled the house. I took a breath and let it burn its way down into my lungs. Then I set out the French toast I made hours earlier, reheated in the oven, warm and crisp at the edges. It wasn't breakfast. It was a stage, and I was ready for the curtain to rise. I looked around the kitchen, every detail curated like a set. The china, the linen, the camellia pinned to my chest. The camera blinked softly in the pantry corner, capturing it all. A still life of a woman reclaiming her story. Then I sat. Not to wait for him, but to sit in my power. Walter finally emerged just after 7, dishevelled, scratching his neck, eyes narrowed. He paused in the hallway, sniffing the air like a dog catching scent. Then he stepped into the kitchen and froze. His eyes landed on the table. The china, the napkins, the food, me. What's all this? I smiled. Breakfast? His face twitched. Since when do you… Sit, I said gently, motioning to the chair across from me. He stared, trying to read me. I could see the confusion, the flicker of suspicion. He didn't trust calm, didn't trust silence when it came from me. He was used to my eyes darting, my hands trembling. Not this stillness, not this resolve. Reluctantly, he sat. We ate in silence. He picked at his food, drank the coffee. His eyes kept darting to mine, then to the camera. He hadn't noticed it yet. Just the tension in the air. The something different. Finally, he grunted. This some kind of show? I looked up, met his gaze. No, it's a goodbye. He blinked. What? I folded my napkin slowly, placed it next to the plate. I'm not running, Walter. I'm not screaming. I'm not hiding in a motel or waiting for you to calm down. His jaw tensed. What are you saying? I'm saying, this is the last time you get to look at me and see a woman who's scared. He leaned back. You're not making sense. I stood, smoothed my dress. Then I looked down at him and said, I've already made the calls. To Ruthie, Reverend Brooks, Detective Monroe. His face paled. You're bluffing. I tilted my head. Am I? He looked around, eyes finally landing on the blinking red light above the pantry. Realization washed over him like cold water. His chair screeched as he pushed it back. You set me up? No, I said quietly. I finally stood up. He opened his mouth to shout, to threaten, to deny. But just then, the doorbell rang. 8:12. On the dot. I didn't flinch. I didn't hurry. I walked slowly, deliberately, past him. He followed, unsure whether to stop me or beg me. I opened the door, and there they stood. Reverend Brooks, his face solemn. Detective Monroe, hands at his sides. And Ruthie, my sister, my blood, with tears in her eyes and steel in her spine. Walter's mouth opened, but no words came out. He looked at each of them like ghosts had risen from the past. And then I turned to him. This is the reckoning, Walter. His hands curled into fists. But he didn't speak, because for the first time in his life, he had no ground to stand on. I stepped aside and let them in. Behind me, the camera kept rolling. The coffee steamed. The china glimmered. The white camellia on my chest didn't wilt. And I didn't look back. The second the doorbell rang, I knew time had run out. Not mine. His. I didn't flinch. Didn't rush. Just walked slowly, calmly, letting my heels click across the hardwood like a metronome counting down the end of a symphony. Walter stood frozen in the hallway behind me. I could feel the weight of his breath, heavy and uneven, hovering like a storm cloud. He hadn't said a word since I mentioned the calls. The silence between us wasn't peace. It was pressure. I opened the front door, and there they were. Ruthie, Reverend Brooks, Detective Monroe, the past, the faith, the law. Each one carried a different kind of truth, and together they formed something bigger than even I had expected. Ruthie gave me a small, knowing nod. She didn't look at Walter. Reverend Brooks adjusted his coat and met my gaze with solemn grace. No anger, just steady resolve. Detective Monroe didn't speak, but his presence filled the porch like a quiet warning. I stepped back and let them in. Walter didn't move. He stood near the fireplace, jaw tight, fingers twitching like they were itching to grab onto the version of control that had just slipped through them. As Ruthie entered, her heels echoed with confidence. She passed him like he wasn't there. Reverend Brooks gave him a brief nod, respectful but distant. And Monroe, he took his time. Scanning the room, noticing everything. The way the table was set, the blinking red light of the hidden camera, the untouched breakfast now cooling on porcelain plates. "This some kind of damn show," Walter muttered under his breath, eyes flicking toward me. "No," I said, standing tall. "This is the finale." Reverend Brooks spoke first. "I remember this home being full of laughter once," he said softly, almost like he was praying aloud. "I remember weddings, baby dedications, potlucks in your backyard. I remember love." His voice caught slightly, then steadied. "And I also remember the first time I saw fear in Elisa's eyes. It wasn't loud. It wasn't bruised. But it was real." Walter scoffed. "What is this? Some church intervention?" "No," Reverend said. "This is your reckoning." Those 4 words fell like a gavel. Walter's eyes darkened. "You people don't know what you're talking about." He turned to me. "You told them lies, spun a few cold nights and arguments into some grand betrayal. You want to make me a villain, Elisa? Fine. But don't pretend you were perfect." "I was never perfect," I said quietly. "But I was faithful. I was patient. I bent so far I forgot what standing up felt like." Detective Monroe stepped forward now, calm and calculated. "I've reviewed several recordings, Mr. Green. Dates, timestamps, consistent verbal abuse, emotional manipulation. In one video, you threatened financial ruin if your wife ever disrespected you again. You knocked over a chair during a dinner argument. In another, you grabbed her wrist." Walter's mouth twisted. "That's not a crime. That's a marriage." "No," Monroe said, his voice razor-sharp. "That's control. And it's exactly why I'm here." The room felt like it had stopped breathing. Then Ruthie broke the silence. "She used to cover for you," she said, her voice cold. "She'd make excuses. Say you were tired. Say work was hard. Say she was overreacting. But do you know what the hardest thing was for me, Walter? Watching my sister disappear?" Walter flinched. "She didn't leave bruises on your ego when she stayed, but you left bruises on her soul every time you treated her like a ghost in her own house." He looked like he was shrinking before our eyes, the bravado slipping, and still, he had to lash out. "This is all her fault," he shouted. "She let the firm turn me into a joke. She made me feel like a failure in my own home." He turned to me, eyes blazing. "You emasculated me, Elisa. You think you get to be the victim because I raised my voice." I took a breath so deep, I felt my lungs tremble. Then I stepped closer. "No, Walter. I get to be the victim because you stopped seeing me as a person." He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. So I kept going. "You thought I was weak because I stayed. You thought I was forgiving because I was afraid. But I wasn't afraid of you. I was afraid of the truth, that I had wasted years hoping you'd become someone who was gone a long time ago." I could feel Ruthie's presence behind me, Reverend Brooks to my right, Detective Monroe near the door. I wasn't alone, and he knew it. Walter's chest rose and fell in panic. "You'll regret this," he said, quieter now, his voice fraying at the edges. I looked at him, and for the first time, I didn't see a monster. I saw a man who had destroyed everything trying to protect his pride. "I might," I said gently, "but I'll regret it in peace." Detective Monroe took out a folded form from his pocket. "We'll be opening a case file. I'll need to speak with you further, Elisa." I nodded. "I'm ready." Walter just stared at me. No more shouting. No more blame. Just silence. And for once, he had nothing left to take. As everyone prepared to leave, Reverend Brooks pulled me aside and whispered, "You did good, child. Not because you stood up to him, but because you stood up for yourself." His words landed deep, like a hand on my back pushing me forward. like grace. When the door shut behind them, I stayed at the threshold for a long moment. The morning sun had risen fully now, washing the porch in gold. The china on the table still gleamed. The camellia on my dress hadn't moved. Walter retreated to the hallway, and I didn't follow. I turned away, with peace in my spine and fire in my soul. I woke up not to an alarm, but to stillness, the kind of stillness that doesn't feel empty, but clean, like a house that's just been aired out after years of being locked tight. I was in Ruthie's guest room. White curtains swayed gently by the window. Sunlight spilled across the hardwood floors. My packed overnight bag sat quietly in the corner, and next to it was my freedom. It didn't scream. It didn't announce itself with trumpets or headlines. It just was. My phone buzzed around 6 a.m. It was Detective Monroe. "Walter's been notified. Charges are official. We're filing today." I didn't reply immediately, just sat there, the phone in my palm, staring at the sunlight on the floor. So, this is what justice feels like, I thought. It doesn't roar. It settles. By noon, I was standing outside the house. Our house. His house. Not mine. I hadn't stepped foot inside since that morning. The morning I served breakfast, not for him, but as a ritual to bury the past. I still had the key. He hadn't changed the lock. I paused at the door. My fingers lingered on the knob, then turned it. Inside, the air was stale. The kind of stale that doesn't just come from time, but from neglect, from silence, from emotional rot. The coffee machine blinked 12x, endlessly stuck in reset. The wedding china was still set on the table, untouched, a museum of a marriage already dead. I walked through the house like a visitor in my own history. My shoes echoed in the hall. The silence wasn't scary anymore. It was familiar. And this time, it bowed to me. I moved room by room, filling 2 boxes with the only things I wanted to take. Mama's brooch, my notebooks, years of private confessions and quiet cries inked into lines. The navy blue sweater Ruthie gave me one Christmas, and 1 teacup. Just one. From the wedding china. The rim had a tiny crack that Walter never noticed, but I always did. It had survived arguments, wine spills, slammed cabinet doors. It wasn't perfect. But neither was I, and both of us were still standing. I was folding the last sweater when I heard the front door open. I knew that sound, even after everything. I knew the way his keys hit the side table, the rhythm of his footsteps, the click of his shoes on tile. Walter. He stopped in the doorway when he saw me. "Eliza," he said, almost in disbelief. I didn't flinch, didn't smile, just looked at him like someone I used to know. "I'm just finishing up," I said. He looked older, not just tired, older. His face was pale, shirt wrinkled, no tie. "They told me," he said, his voice hoarse, "about the charges." I nodded. "Good." He looked around the room like he couldn't decide where to stand. "I didn't know it had gotten this bad," he said. I blinked, slowly. "It got this bad the first time you looked at me like I was a failure instead of a partner." He winced. "I was under pressure. I didn't mean to." "But you did," I cut in, my voice low. "You meant every time you told me I was lucky to have you. Every time you isolated me from friends. Every time you called me sensitive when I cried." His eyes welled. I lost control. I shook my head. "No. You exercised control. You enjoyed it. Until I said no." He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded letter. "I wrote something," he said. "You don't have to read it. I had to say it." I took it, held it in my hand without opening it. Then he said something I never thought I'd hear. "I'm sorry, Elisa. For real. Not because I got caught. Because I finally see what I did. Silence. Not the weaponized kind, the kind that follows truth. Thank you, I said. But I'm not here for your guilt. I'm here to move on. He nodded slowly. I ruined everything, he whispered. No, I said. You chose everything. He looked down, and for the first time, I didn't feel the urge to fix anything. He asked softly, Do you hate me? I thought about it. For once, I let the question sit. No, I answered honestly. But I don't love you either. Not anymore. His eyes filled. You'll regret this someday. I stepped forward, meeting his eyes with calm, clear truth. I might, but I'll regret it in peace. That broke him. He sat down at the dining chair, hunched over, the strong man he once was, now a whisper of himself. And I? I walked away. That evening, I sat at Ruthie's kitchen table and finally opened the letter. It was messy, scratched out lines, smudged ink. But this one sentence stayed with me. I loved you so poorly, Elisa, and yet you still stayed long enough to try. I folded the letter. Didn't tear it. Didn't treasure it either. I placed it in my journal, not to remember him, but to remember how far I had come. Later that week, Gloria texted, You've done more than survive. You've claimed your life back. And for the first time, I believed her. The community heard. The church stood behind me. Even Reverend Brooks sent a note. You showed more grace than he deserved. That's how I know you've healed. Still, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt quiet, like a candle still flickering after a storm, like morning fog lifting, revealing a road I hadn't dared to walk in years. On Sunday, I returned to the house one last time, not to retrieve anything, just to close the door. I walked the halls, took a final breath, then left a single camellia on the kitchen counter. Not for him, for me. Because I made it out. Not untouched, but alive. And that was enough. It's been 6 months. 6 months since I closed the door on that house, on that life. Since the morning light hit my face in a different place, and I no longer flinched at my own reflection. Since I stopped measuring time in wounds. And still, sometimes I wake in the middle of the night and forget where I am. The ceiling looks unfamiliar. The quiet feels too soft. My body, for a split second, braces for the weight of fear. But then I remember. I'm safe. I'm free. And this quiet isn't danger. It's peace. I live now in a small second-floor apartment above a florist's shop on Willow Street. The landlady is kind, a widow who bakes too much banana bread and slips extra slices through my mail slot. The apartment has peeling paint and a crooked window, but it also has sun. Glorious, honest sun that spills into every corner by 8 a.m. There's no marble kitchen, no walk-in closets. But there's no shouting either. No footsteps, I fear. No silence that cuts. Just me, a warm mug, and the sound of morning birds. I've started keeping a garden again. Just a few pots on the narrow balcony. Rosemary, lavender, and camellias. The camellias are stubborn. Some mornings, I catch myself whispering to them, coaxing them out of the soil like they're old friends afraid to try again. Sometimes, I think they're like me, growing, even when it's hard. Every Thursday, I walk 2 blocks to the church and lead a reading circle for women. Some are fresh out of bruised marriages. Others carry invisible scars from childhood. We read poetry, scripture, memoirs. The kind of words that reach past the surface and hold your ribcage together when the world tries to shake it apart. One woman, Angela, said last week, I feel like I lost who I was. I looked at her for a long moment, then said, maybe you didn't lose her. Maybe she was just hiding, waiting for you to come get her. She cried. So did I, not out of grief, out of recognition. I don't talk about Walter much. There's nothing new to say. He took a plea deal, anger management, court-ordered counseling. I didn't go to the hearings. I didn't need to. The truth wasn't something I owed him in person anymore. It had already been spoken, and more importantly, heard. He sent me a letter, a single-page apology with no return address. I opened it, read it once, then folded it and tucked it inside my journal, the one where I'd recorded every night he made me feel small, not to forgive him, but to remind myself that I had survived him, that I wasn't crazy, that I was real. Last week, something happened I didn't expect. I laughed, not a chuckle, not a polite smile. A real, messy, belly laugh that startled even me. It happened while Ruthie was telling a story about her granddaughter dumping an entire container of glitter into her bathwater. I pictured the scene, and before I could stop myself, there it was. Laughter. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty for being happy. I still have bad days. Sometimes I still flinch at loud voices. Sometimes I still doubt my own memory. Sometimes I still stare too long at the scars no one else can see. But those moments are no longer the whole story. They are only parts of it. And the story, my story, is still being written. One morning, I visited a plant nursery outside town. I wasn't shopping. I just wanted to walk among the green things and inhale air that wasn't heavy with memory. A little girl dropped a flower pot, and the stem of a white camellia snapped. She burst into tears, and her mother rushed over to comfort her. I knelt beside the girl. Sometimes, I told her, things break, but that doesn't mean they can't be beautiful again. She looked at me, eyes round and watery. Then she handed me the broken flower. "Here," she said. "You can have it." I brought it home, placed it in a glass jar by the window, right beside a new camellia I'd planted 2 months ago, the first thing I grew after leaving. They sat there, side by side, one broken, one blooming, and I realized I wasn't just watching plants grow. I was watching myself. That evening, I sat with my journal again. The pages had long been filled. Years of silence turned into sentences. But I turned to the very last page and wrote, "I forgive you. Not because you asked, not because you earned it, but because I refuse to carry this weight into the life I've built." I closed the journal, tied it with twine, and slid it into the back of my closet, not to forget, but to finish. Peace didn't come to me like a revelation. It came like a whisper, a gentle unfolding, the kind of thing you only notice when you're no longer running. And I wasn't running anymore. That night, I stood on my balcony as the sun dipped low behind the trees. The sky turned the color of soft plum, and the air held the scent of soil and rosemary. Somewhere, wind chimes danced, and in the stillness, I heard something I hadn't heard in years, the sound of my own peace. It didn't roar, it didn't shout, it just was, soft, steady, beautiful. Forgiveness is mine, and that's enough. Not all revenge takes the form of anger. There are women like Elisa Green. They don't scream, don't slam fists on tables, don't drag anyone to court just to feel vindicated. They simply rise, gather the past into a quiet bundle, and walk away. They reclaim every invisible sacrifice that others once took for granted. They rewrite the meaning of weakness. They forgive. Not because the other person deserves it, but because they themselves deserve peace. If you're carrying a silent pain, if you're counting every breath in a house that no longer feels like home, remember this: you are not alone. And maybe, just maybe, stepping out that door is where life begins again.